This is part 3 of my story. This is the evolution of Green City Acres and all the big things that I've learned and that have sort of distilled down to get to where I am today. So let's go from my first year all the way to, this is my 8th year of farming, so I've been doing this for 8 years now. Technically, we're just wrapping up our 8th year. And the underlying theme, or the sort of the moral of the story that I want to drive home to you guys, is this idea of the Pareto Principle. And the Pareto Principle in a nutshell goes something like this: 20% of your customers will be 80% of your business. 20% of your products will bring you 80% of your revenue. 20% of the things you do on your farm will be 80% of the total leverage or effectiveness of the things that you do on your farm. The moral, the point is that there's always this tiny fraction that delivers the most amount of value. And I found, even just thinking about the world at large, understanding the Pareto Principle, or as they also call it, the Pareto distribution, also explains a lot about the world. It also explains a lot of the inequality in the world, but I don't want to sideline, I don't want to go there, but it makes a lot of sense. And if you continue to identify each year what are the things that you're doing that are effective and what are the things that you're doing that aren't effective, and eliminating or mitigating the things that aren't effective and doubling down on the things that are effective, you can essentially grow your business without actually technically growing your business. You can become more profitable by doing what's more important. And that has been the key, especially in my last few years. That really driving that thing home has made the biggest difference. So going into my second year of farming, I kept taking on more land, but I did drop some of the plots that were way out of the way. So I wasn't centralized, but I was more consolidated into a closer area. I still had a lot of riding to do, but over the 8 years of my farm, it's spread out like this, and it continuously consolidates down to the point now where most of it is within a few blocks. And so my second year of farming, I started running a CSA, a community supported agriculture, a box program. And I did a CSA for 2 years after that. So I did a CSA all the way up till my 4th year of farming. And it was one of those things that didn't really pass the Pareto test. Didn't really deliver that much value. But I did it. In my second year, I had a small CSA, about 20 members. I sold at farmers markets. In some parts of the season, I sold twice a week, so Saturdays and sometimes Wednesdays. And then in my second season, I started selling to more restaurants. And I really started to grow that part of the business. I started selling to some top chefs in the area, and I still wasn't saying no enough. I was still saying yes to everybody, and that was giving me challenges. But in my second year, I did about double what I did in the first year. So my second year I did around, I think it was 55,000 in gross revenue. I had a decent sized net there because my overhead was very low in there. I had one full-time employee my second and third year of farming. And my third year we grew it a bit more, didn't double it, but we went to about 65,000. At that point we were at about, it was around a half an acre. And going into my 4th year of farming, that's where I made a significant move, and I learned a lot of lessons from this move. But what happened was I amalgamated my farm with a friend of mine's farm it was a good friend of mine, and they also were farming. They started a year after I did, but we put our operations together and we amalgamated to a 2.5 acre farm on 12 different sites. We had an 80 member CSA, 2 farmers markets, we had about 15 restaurants that we were selling to. It was big. We had 2 post-harvest areas, one on the other side of town where we did most of the CSA, and then one in the downtown plots where I washed all the greens and did that kind of stuff. And it was crazy. I guess the desire to form the partnership actually came from me because I saw my friend John, who I really admired and respected. I saw him doing okay, and I thought, we're buddies, we're hanging out all the time, we're always talking shop, why don't we just put our farms together? And I think it was a short-sighted decision. The partnership didn't last long at all. Like, we realized in May of that year that it wasn't working, and and then I think it was like late June that year, big conversations of like, okay, we're going to dissolve this in the fall, but we have to stick out the season, because if we don't stick out the season, then we're all going to be screwed. And so that was the most difficult season of my life, because it wasn't amicable. The friendships were falling apart. At this point now, it's all good. Like, we're all friends now and everything, but it was very difficult then, and we just had too much. Like, we did too much. It was like 80 or more different types of vegetables, all these different market streams, all this driving around, biking around. It was crazy. We had, we also took some serious hits that year too. We had in August, we had this hailstorm that came in and wiped out like most of the farm. That we had a 2-acre site where we did all the more like long season, lower value vegetables. We did it all there. Entire place got wiped out. $30,000 of crop damage in a half an hour. So like that was pretty testing. It was a tough year, and so the relationships in the partnerships fell apart, but also the relationship I was in at the time also fell apart. So that 4th year of farming was like the biggest sort of test of my life that I've had this far, where everything fell apart at once. And sometimes you just have to kind of hit rock bottom to really start from scratch and build yourself back up. And so looking back at it, all of this stuff, I don't know if it happened for a reason, but it really felt like it did. And it was an important turning point in my life, and so we dissolved the farming partnership in October that year, and then I went on and did a winter farming season. We had a mild winter that year, and I ran a winter CSA, and I did it all here. I was renting this house at the time. I own it now, but I was renting it, and I didn't have the passive solar greenhouse or any of that infrastructure back there. I was packing my greens in my office in the winter. It sucked. It was horrible. It was a real grind. But my partner, like my relationship at that time, fell apart as well, and it just wasn't working. We weren't happy and all that kind of stuff. And going into my next year, we had planned the CSA and all this stuff, and I realized, like, okay, I have to cancel this. So I had to refund a bunch of CSA members their money. It was a total nightmare. But in the end, it worked out okay. But really, what I learned in that year is that if you really want to move forward in your life quickly, you have to eliminate negative people out of your life. And there was a lot of people in my life at that time, not to say that they're negative now, but at that time they were very negative in my life. It was toxic, and that relationship was toxic, and it had to end. And by it ending, I felt like I'd been driving a car my entire life with the e-brake slightly on. Like, I've been kind of like, couldn't really get as much momentum as I discovered that I did have, or that I found. And it was amazing that year. I mean, I totally broke down. I can't say I was depressed, but it was extremely difficult to deal with that breakup and that partnership falling apart, worrying about money and all this kind of stuff. And then in my 5th year of farming, I totally crushed it. Like, I basically, in that winter, when I had to make all these split decisions, like, okay, I gotta cancel the CSA, I'm just gonna strip it down and do things really simple. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna sell to these, handful of restaurants. I'm gonna do one farmer's market a week, and then just do greens and just specialize. Greens, tomatoes, microgreens, the stuff that you guys have known me for in the last 2 years of my videos. Went with that stuff, and it worked really well. And so out of all that came my book deal. I wrote a book that I wrote the outline that summer, finished writing it the next season, but it was amazing how all that changed, because I eliminated negative people from my life and just kind of stripped my life down, and then made things simple to go ahead. And so if you think about the 80-20 thing, I kind of applied that to my personal life. And going into my 5th, 6th, and 7th year of farming, I continuously doubled down on the things that were working and eliminating the things that weren't. And so it was just a continuous refinement. And I had actually dropped other plots, taken on new ones, but my farm is really consolidated down. And keep in mind with all this, the only reason I farm the way I do in urban plots is because when I started, I had no other options. I had no way of buying land and just doing a single site. If I would have had those means when I started, I would have happily done that. And I might do that at some point now. I've got the resources to do that, so who knows where that kind of thing could go. I think there's a lot of advantages to being on a single site. But I live here now, I own this house, so I'm not going anywhere anytime soon, but that evolution might continue to happen in that way. And as the farm is today, the things that we're growing they're all in context to what our operation is, and they make sense in that context. If I was farming in the country and doing something else, I might run it differently. I might do more types of crops and engage more types of customers, but that's not the context we're in right now. And so that was really what it was about, was eliminating this dead weight. And it's a constant process of refining and refining and refining. One thing I try to do every year is I look at my calendar and I look at my season, I look at our sales, and I analyze everything. I go, what was really easy to do there, what was enjoyable to do, what delivered returns, and then what didn't. And so the things that was easy to do delivered good returns and that I enjoyed doing, let's do more of that stuff. And the things that didn't deliver returns, things that I don't enjoy doing, things that were a hassle to do, let's mitigate or eliminate those things. And so we're constantly doing that. So even in this season here, in year 8, things that we tried that we really liked. I tried doing the paper pot transplanter. I loved it. It frees up almost 100 hours a season. Well, this year we didn't start using it for the whole season, but it probably saved us at least 50 hours of labor just this season, and next year will be even more because we're going to do more lettuce. So I like that. I'm going to keep going with that. Tomatoes this year didn't work out so well for us for a variety of different reasons. I've talked about that in some previous videos. And they weren't really selling as great as I had in the past. I think our grocery store markets really like our greens. Like, that's our thing, is greens, and so we're gonna go with that. We're not actually gonna do tomatoes commercially next year. I'll grow some for myself, but we're gonna try a season without them and see how it goes. Things like definitely market streams. Like, some customers are really low maintenance and some customers are high maintenance. The funny thing is about customers, I don't know if this is universally true, but I found this universally true in my life, is that the highest maintenance customers spend the least amount of money and the lowest maintenance customers spend the most amount of money. So that's an easy decision there. Go with that. Follow the path of least resistance. And that's basically my whole approach with all this, is I'm going to follow the path of least resistance. I'm going to go the way that makes the most amount of sense for our context, because I'm kind of done with the idealism with our farm. When I started at the very beginning, I was very idealistic, very wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I wanted to solve all the world's problems and I wanted to do everything, but I totally burnt myself out and just drove myself into the ground. And even though I felt like I was pursuing a sustainable agricultural system there, it wasn't sustainable for me. So that's what's really important here, is it's got to be sustainable for you. You got to make a living at this. You got to enjoy this. You have to have quality time with your family and with yourself or your friends, so that you can come back fresh and actually continue to do it. Because if you don't, you're going to burn out. And if you burn out and you quit, then nobody wins and you don't even achieve the goals that you want to achieve anyways. So I'm past the idealism of wanting to solve all the world's food system problems. I'm happy to contribute to the solutions, but I'm not going to provide all the solutions. I'm going to do what's best for me, and if it works within my holistic context, then that's great, and I need to make a living at it first of all. So that's really where it is. And it's really about quality of life, especially now that I'm a parent. My biggest motivation in life is my family, and if I have too much time away from my family because I'm working and I'm always catching up and trying to put out fires and solve problems on things that I didn't foresee, then that's not going to work for me anymore. So that's kind of where I'm at today. I hope you guys have found this stuff helpful or inspiring. Leave your questions and comments below, and we'll see you next time.